Hi, my name is Debbie Merkel. I'm a Kelowna artist, and I'm here today with my friend Michelle Wiebe. And she's starting her own YouTube channel, which is super exciting.
It's time, Debbie.
Yes, welcome, Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
So, Michelle, have there been any challenges in learning alcohol inks?
Definitely. Well, I think just even being self-taught, a lot of people are like, so how do you know what you're doing? You know, like there's always kind of like that. So where did you, figure this out or whatever? So definitely. And then even playing with a new medium, like a lot of people are like, alcohol inks are never going to stay. They're not going to hang around.
I think that was, that
right?
was something
that was a
people
big
said.
one. Like people are a lot of like a napalm, like, no, that's not going to fly. They ain't going to stand the test of time. But so in the beginning, it was the self-taught part and building my own confidence, because it wasn't like, oh, I've got this little art degree here, I'm going to do. So it was really just kind of saying to myself, like, what do I bring to the table, right? So what do I bring to the table when I teach, I feel, is just an open forum of expression. And it's really, I think, my truest goal is to see people be able to openly express whatever it is they want to see, not what I want them to see. So I think a lot of times in a class, and I've had this feedback, well, you got your art teacher, and you can't do that, and you can't do this, and it's got to look like this when you're done. We're all going to have the same outcome. That just kind of like kills the joy in that moment for me. Like that's kind of like, now I'm just going to make you all be the same here.
Oh, yeah.
But we're not the same. So I really encourage, like in my class, to be like, what's your colors? What do you want to make? What does that look like to you? Here, maybe I'm showing you this today, and if you like that, great. If you want to do that, awesome. But if you got something else that's in your mind and you want it to come out, I'm going to help you get there.
Well, do what feels good.
Do what feels good. And that's it. I want the feeling. So that's another part that you just hit on. It's a feeling. So how do I know when a piece is done? How do I know when I've got the right color? How do I know when the piece, it's a feeling. It's never like the visual thing for me. It's like, yeah, I'm good. That feels right.
Well, and it's probably too because you're so intuitive, right? It's that feeling.
The spidey senses, yeah. And so that's it. That's really the thing. And then what happened was, through that, I was kind of like going, okay, how else? Well, I actually had a girlfriend who was like, you need to level up. You need to level up. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, you need to start resining your pieces. You need to start, right? So then it was kind of like, oh, now I got to learn something else on something else I'm learning. And then it kind of felt like a little scary, because it was like, well, I love my art and I love my tiles, but now you want me to pour something over them. Like, then what happens, right? So that was a whole learning curve, because with the isopropanol, anything in a polyurethane world wakes it back up.
So what happens?
Okay, so with the ink, it's never fully dead until it's sealed. So like with my inks, if I put it on a tile and I didn't seal it, I could come back in 10 years from now and I could go play with that and recreate and manipulate. So until I seal it, or seal it and resin, it's not a done. And I think people like that too, especially starting out, because it allows them the freedom to go, oh, well, if I don't like this, I can just wipe that tile right off and I can start again. I'm like, yep. And again, it just kind of goes, well, I'm not wasting money. I can use that one tile 20 times before I, so it's kind of a safe jump out to a creative medium. And so that was another kind of buy-in. But then when I got the resin going.
So tell me, what would happen, and maybe you did this, I don't know.
No.
What would happen if you didn't seal it and you put the resin on it?
It would wake it up. So all the colors would start to pull into the resin. And it can be a real cool outcome.
I bet that would look really cool.
It can, but if you have a beautiful picture that you have perfected and spent a whole bunch of time, and then all of a sudden you put your resin on and it starts changing and shifting, and it could be.
I think that would be very fun.
It was a bit of a curve, let's just say, because it was like, oh, I'm ready, And so so learning. So you have to seal it really well, and there's only a couple of specific sealers that you can actually use to actually put it to sleep. Then you go on with the resin.
Well, but the resin you have to be so careful with, because you can't have any bubbles, and don't you kind of waste a lot of it too?
Well, for me, mine's on an open pour. So sometimes when people are pouring, like they just let it flow over the edges.
Yeah.
I kind of like put a little painter's tape just to kind of make a barrier.
Okay.
And then once it starts to cure, pull that and it'll stop again, lots of learning once you get into the resin. And so that's the other thing. Once I start playing with the resin, I'm like, now what? What else can I put in here? So now it's a magical mixture of everything. So mica powders.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I'm using acrylics in there. Sometimes I'm just using the resin dyes. Sometimes I'm using the alcohol inks to tint mine.
Charcoal.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It just becomes even more vast than it started out to be once you start incorporating all these.
Just feels like a huge, great big canvas to me with all of
Yeah,
those things.
yeah, and it never stops.
Not a little tile.
No. And that's how you start safe.
Yeah,
But then as
yeah.
you go, so then that was the thing. So with canvases, you can't even use a canvas straight up. That's how it comes because the ink just absorbs. So then my thing was like,
Oh, of course.
how do I get to the other side of that? So I found a sealer that I could put on that made my canvas not porous any
Yeah.
longer. And so that got me onto canvases. And then that was a huge game changer because now I'm like, whoop, we going
Yeah.
up. Yeah, so then it just allowed me to have more freedom of size. Then I started incorporating air. So I'd use an air compressor. And I do some flowers that are basically, I call them like a fantasy flower.
Yeah.
So it's the inks on those canvases that are sealed. Then I take my air compressor and I move the inks with the air compressor.
I've watched videos on that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's quite something.
It's just, and again, you have to allow the process to be what it is, right? So a lot of times people are like, oh, and I'm like, no, if you get a drop there or a piece of, something falls in or you got a little bit of extra ink, it's part of the process. Don't stress, don't worry, don't be like, gotta fix that. It's not a fix, it's just blender in there, make it part of it. So yeah, that was the other thing, to just accept how it's gonna come out.
Well, and I think the process allows people, especially if they're perfectionists, you just sort of push themselves,
Yeah.
right?
I've only had 2 people that really
Couldn't do
couldn't find
it.
the flow. Couldn't find the flow in there. Kind of like, but it is. It's kind of a medium you have to let go with. You have to let it show you what
Yeah.
it's going to show you.
Yeah.
And
Gotta go with it.
Yeah, and you can get to a place like I've been able to do stuff like that's more specific and detailed, like a horse or an elephant or something that's resembled in nature. But a lot of times it's just fun to see what it shows you and allow it to be an abstract.
That's the best part.
Yeah, just having it arrive.
I love that. In fact, I used to do abstracts, and that was part of my process. I didn't really know what was going on until about 2/3 of the way through the painting.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And did you find, like, when you show people, they would see so many different
Yeah.
things, right? So you may see one thing or kind of get a feeling, and then they'd be like, oh, but...
Yeah.
And so I love that part of the abstract is that everybody pulls out something different.
Well, I love being a fly on the wall when people look at paintings
Yeah,
because then it's like, oh, I didn't see that.
I didn't
or-
see that.
yeah.
And then, you can make a suggestion. Well, I kind of was doing it, and they're like, oh, right? So I just love how people can perceive it and how it affects people. But also, when I was working in my little art shows or working out in the markets, I really just remember people coming by and getting the wow. And I was always wanting that wow. And when I started getting the wows, I knew I was like, okay, I'm onto something here, because if I can get the wow, that's calling up something in those moments. That's pulling out something it just comes out. Like, it's not like you're thinking about it. It's just, whoop, there's your wow. So that was kind of like a little universal signal to keep going to.
That's cool.
Yeah. But I think too, like when I look back on the journey, a new medium, self-taught, it was a little challenge, but at the same time, very rewarding when you get to the point where people are like, hey, aren't you that girl who did that class? And, and people start to recognize you for it, right? Yeah. And so, and those opportunities just kind of seem to come more and more where people are like, well, would you? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just the freedom, I think, is the really big thing that people really appreciate when I teach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you like what you saw today, please subscribe to the channel.